coffee with my friend Lori on Friday mornings usually. And we would bake. And one of the favorite things we would make is banana bread muffins with chocolate chips. So this recipe that I'm using today is from my friend Lori. And yeah, I make banana bread muffins quite often. I really enjoy them, and I keep them in the freezer and just have a few out at a time, and it's wonderful. So anytime someone stops over, I usually have some muffins on hand. Most of you gals don't have home ec in school anymore, so I'm going to tell you a few things that Mrs. Allgard used to tell us back in the day. Most of you don't like bananas that look ugly. You want them to be really nice and pretty and yellow and almost green. Those are not good bananas for baking. You want your bananas to be a little bit soft, you want them to be a little bit brown. When I open this up, it still looks really pretty nice inside for the most part. But for banana bread, you want ripe bananas. I oftentimes have bananas on hand that have gone a little too long and they're ripe, and I can use them fresh. Or I oftentimes will bag them up in a freezer lock baggie and stick them in my freezer, and then they're ready to go. If I am starting with frozen bananas, I put them in a little bit of hot water for a few minutes while I'm gathering up my other things, and within just a few minutes, these are perfect for baking. Today we have fresh ones, so I'm going to put these back in the freezer. But it's really handy to have them frozen. Sometimes I'll just throw one banana in the freezer because I don't have enough to bake a batch of bread. And then you just warm them up a little bit and they come right out of their peelings. But you need ripe bananas, about 4 of them for this recipe. Another thing that you probably don't know about is that when you start baking any quick breads, you should mix your sugar and your butter first, and you want to blend that really well first before you add your other stuff. Now, I didn't have enough butter sitting out at room temperature this morning, so instead of nuking it in the microwave and then it turns into a puddle, I just put it in my oven for a minute, and now it's soft enough that I can leave a thumbprint in there. And so yeah, that's going to be about perfect. So I'm going to use both brown sugar and white sugar because I like the flavor of brown sugar better. But you could use just white sugar or just brown sugar or a mix. So we're going to mix those first, and then we're going to mix our dry ingredients, which are just flour and baking soda. And then we'll add our wet ingredients. I'm going to have some vanilla, 1 egg, again preferably room temperature, and about 4 ripe bananas. So an important home ec tip is don't plug in your mixer until you're ready to go. Make sure that it's not plugged in when you're putting your bowl in, when you're adjusting your blade and things. Make sure everything's ready to go before you plug this in. You don't want to be cutting off any fingers accidentally. Make sure it's turned off so that it's not running. Lift it up. We're going to add a 1/2 cup or 1 stick, a 1/2 cup of butter, preferably room temperature, so it's going to mix nicely. And then I just keep this little container here for my spatula. And we need 1 cup of sugar. And whether you use the whole cup of white or you use partly brown and partly white, it really doesn't matter. But I usually go about 1/3 white and about 2/3 brown sugar, because I think brown sugar has a little more flavor. But if I don't have a lot of brown sugar on hand, then I use 2/3 of the white and 1 of the, it doesn't matter how you do it. The options are there. So you need a cup of sugar, one way or another. And then we're going to mix that. You want to mix your butter and your sugar together and let that blend really nicely. That's an important secret. And then while that is mixing, I measure out my dry ingredients. We're going to use 2 cups of flour. Now again, I could use all white flour, or I could use 1/2 and 1/2 of white flour and whole wheat flour. If my mama's going to be coming to visit, I will put in some oatmeal. Usually I will use instant oatmeal, and I just replace part of those 2 cups of flour. But basically you need 2 cups of flour. of whatever variety of flour you want. In addition to that flour, we're going to use 1 teaspoon of baking soda. There's baking soda and there's baking powder, and they are different. They both basically help things to rise, but there's a big difference between them. So make sure what your recipe says, if it's soda or baking powder. But 1 teaspoon of soda, and then I just stir that up a little bit with a fork or a whisk, and then I start including that. My butter and sugar are well blended, so I'm going to turn this back on again, and I'm just going to start adding my flour. Put a little bit of that in there, and then I'm going to add my liquid ingredients. Making sure it's turned off, could even unplug it. I'm going to add 1 egg and throw the shell and wash my hands. This is why I always keep a sink full of hot soapy water ready. I'm going to add about a teaspoon or a tablespoon of vanilla, about that much, and then my bananas. And I'm going to open this up. There we go. And quickly peel these and add those. Oftentimes I use bananas that have already been frozen, and they're in a bag, and I've warmed them up in some hot water, and then I just throw them in there, and it works really well. But you want nice, soft, ripe bananas for this. About 4 of them, depending on how big or little your bananas are. Some recipes call for 2 large bananas. Some of them call for about 2 cups of mashed banana. If your bananas are not ripe enough, you want to mash them with a fork ahead of time. If they are too fresh and too solid, they don't mush up and mix in very well. So if you mash them with a fork, then they'll work better. But there, we add our 4 bananas, turn it down and turn it on and let that go. Once all those wet ingredients are mixed in well, I keep adding a little bit more of the flour, the dry mixture, a little at a time, so it doesn't just poof all over the place. Let that mix a little bit, and then we'll stop it and use a spatula, and then we'll add the chocolate chips. Now that our banana bread dough is all mixed up, we have to get our pans ready. Most of the time, you make banana bread in a loaf pan. I don't like the way banana bread turns out, though, in that, for me, because it's never quite done in the middle and the outside gets too far done, and so I don't like using loaf pans. For muffins, I usually like cupcake liners and a round pan, but with banana bread, the liners tend to make them too dry, so that's not my favorite option. I do like these really, really tiny loaf pans. Those are pretty nice, but there's individual ones and it's a little bit messy. So my absolute favorite best option are these pans. They're muffin pans, but they are rectangular, and I love them. So I'm gonna put some butter in here, and then we're gonna put the dough in there and get them in the oven, and yeah, they'll be wonderful. So even though I'm kind of artsy-fartsy and random abstract and stuff like that, I still like to be really neat. So every time I'm done with something, I like to clean up and put things away. But anyway, I like using a little brush when I'm putting my butter in the pans, when I'm greasing the pans. I can use my fingers, but I don't like my fingers to get all messy and dirty. So I usually use soft butter and a brush. Make sure you get plenty of butter into the corners, because that's where they're going to stick. When you dump them out, when they're done baking, if there wasn't enough butter in the corners, they'll stick and they'll pull apart there. And I want them to be perfect if at all possible. So the trick is plenty of butter. So now if you have somebody in your family who does not like chocolate chips, now's the time to make a couple of muffins without the chocolate chips. But otherwise we're going to add a cup of chocolate chips to the mix and then put them in the pans. Mix that up. At this point we are done mixing, so I'm going to unplug it. Safety first, you know. And then we'll get all the little extras off the beaters. Now, there's raw egg in here, so you probably shouldn't lick the batter off the beaters, but if somebody's not too worried about that, you could eat that. Otherwise, it is time to start putting this in the pans. Yum. And you just fill them all up and try to keep them about the same size. I have found that when I mix this up, 2 big pans, just not quite enough batter. 2 little pans, there's a little too much batter. So I use 1 small pan and 1 big pan, and then just like Goldilocks, it's just right. So the banana bread is all in the muffins. I have my oven warmed up to 350 degrees. I'm going to put these in here for about 25 minutes. Timer. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and start. And they will be so yummy. The 25 minutes is up. We're going to take the banana bread out. Oh, look at how yummy, scrumptious, perfect those look. I have my cooling rack out, which is really just my breadboard. Sometimes I actually have little racks that I use to let them cool, but oh, we'll let them sit for just a moment and then we'll dump them out. And if they stick a little bit, I tend to use a little plastic knife to go around the edge so they don't stick. But yum! Ta-da! Yum, yum, yum. So another perfect batch of banana bread chocolate chip muffins from my friend Lori's favorite recipe. See you soon. Toodaloo.